The blood on the snow told Logan Quinn everything he needed to know about the cabin before he even pushed open the door. It was January 1878, and the Wyoming mountains had turned merciless. Logan had been tracking a wounded elk for the better part of 3 hours when he'd stumbled across the small cabin nestled in a grove of pines, smoke no longer rising from its chimney despite the bitter cold that turned breath to ice. The blood trail led right to the door, but it wasn't elk blood. Too much of it, spread in patterns that spoke of violence rather than hunting. Logan's massive frame filled the doorway as he stepped inside, his broad shoulders nearly brushing both sides of the frame. His dark hair hung past his collar, frozen strands clinging to his beard. Muscles honed by years of surviving alone in these mountains tensed beneath his heavy coat as his eyes adjusted to the dim interior. The cabin was small, perhaps 12 feet square, with a cold fireplace and overturned furniture. 2 bodies lay on the floor, a man and a woman, both past saving. But movement in the corner caught his attention. She was huddled behind an overturned table, a rifle clutched in shaking hands, the barrel pointed directly at his chest. Her dark blonde hair hung in tangles around a face gone pale with cold and fear. Her green eyes were wide but fierce, the look of someone who'd already decided to go down fighting. "Easy now," Logan said, his deep voice low and steady. He kept his hands visible, his own rifle pointed at the floor. "I'm not here to hurt you. They said that too." Her voice trembled but held strength underneath. "Right before they killed my parents," Logan's jaw tightened. "When? Yesterday, maybe the day before, I don't know anymore." The rifle wavered slightly. "The fire went out last night. I couldn't leave to get more wood. I thought they might come back. They won't." Logan had seen the tracks outside, 3 riders heading east. They'd be miles away by now, probably halfway to whatever hole they'd crawled out of. "You're freezing. That rifle won't do you any good if you're dead from cold." She didn't lower the weapon. "Why should I trust you? Because if I wanted you dead, you'd be dead already. And because if you stay in here another night without heat, you'll freeze whether you trust me or not." He slowly began to move toward the fireplace, watching her from the corner of his eye. "I'm going to get this fire started. Then we'll talk." To his surprise, she didn't shoot him. The rifle barrel followed his movements as he knelt by the hearth, but she didn't pull the trigger. Logan worked quickly, his thick fingers surprisingly deft as he arranged kindling and struck his flint. Within minutes, flames began to lick at the dry wood, throwing warmth and light into the cabin. "What's your name?" he asked, still keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Olivia. Olivia Reeves." Her voice was stronger now, but he could hear her teeth chattering. "These were my parents' homestead. Pa brought us out here 3 years ago from Ohio, said he wanted to try his hand at trapping." Logan nodded, feeding larger pieces of wood to the growing fire. "Logan Quinn. I've got a place about 8 miles north of here, up near the ridge. Been in these mountains going on 7 years now." He glanced at the bodies, then back at her. "We need to deal with them before dark, and we need to figure out what you're going to do." "Do?" Olivia finally lowered the rifle, exhaustion seeming to crash over her all at once. "I'm going to stay here. This is my home." Logan stood, his full height impressive in the small cabin. At 6'4" and built like someone who'd spent years wrestling nature itself, he cut an imposing figure, but his voice remained gentle. "How old are you, Miss Reeves?" 22. "Old enough to know my own mind. Old enough to know these mountains will kill you if you try to winter here alone." He gestured around the cabin. "How much food you got left?" Olivia's silence was answer enough. Logan walked to the small pantry, already knowing what he'd find. 1 sack of flour, maybe 5 pounds. A handful of dried beans, some salt. Nothing else. The root cellar built into the floor revealed potatoes that had frozen and gone soft, utterly useless. The winter supplies ran low, Olivia said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. We'd been rationing since Christmas. Pa was supposed to go to Marysvale for more supplies 2 weeks ago, but a storm came through. Then another. He kept saying he'd go as soon as the weather cleared, but it never did. And then those men came. Logan turned to look at her fully for the first time. Even exhausted and terrified, there was something striking about her. Not just her features, though those were fine enough, but the set of her jaw, the way she held herself despite everything. This was someone who wouldn't break easily. Did you know them? The men who did this? She shook her head. Drifters, I think. They asked if we had food to spare. Pa said we had barely enough for ourselves. One of them, the one with the scar across his nose, he said they'd take what they needed then. Pa tried to stop them. Her voice broke slightly. Ma grabbed the rifle, but she wasn't fast enough. Logan felt the familiar cold anger settle in his chest. He'd seen too much of this in his years out here. The wilderness brought out the best and worst in men, and sometimes the worst won out. Where'd you hide? There's a space under the floorboards, there in the corner. Pa built it when we first came, said you never knew when you might need a hiding place. I heard Ma scream my name, telling me to hide, so I did. The shame in her voice was palpable. I hid while they died. You survived. That's what your ma wanted. Logan moved back toward the fire, giving her space. But you can't stay here alone, Miss Reeves. Even if those men don't come back, winter's got another 3 months left in her at least. This cabin won't see you through. I don't have anywhere else to go. No other family. And I won't go to some town and become a. She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. I've got a place, Logan heard himself say, surprising himself even as the words left his mouth. It's bigger than this, better insulated. I've got stores that'll see 2 people through till spring, assuming we're careful. You can stay there until the thaw, then figure out what you want to do. Olivia stared at him. Live with you, a stranger, that's hardly proper. Proper's got nothing to do with staying alive. Logan met her eyes steadily. I won't touch you if that's what you're worried about. You can have the loft, I'll sleep by the fire. But I won't lie to you, Miss Reeves. You've got 2 choices. Come with me or die in this cabin. Those are the only options winter's giving you. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Logan could see her mind working, weighing the risks. Trust a strange mountain man or face the wilderness alone. Neither option was good, but one was decidedly less fatal. We'd have to bury them first, she finally said. I won't leave them like this. Logan nodded. Ground's frozen solid, but there's a snowbank on the south side that's deep. We can cover them proper, mark the spot. Come spring thaw, we can do better. You'd help me do that, even though you didn't know them. Everyone deserves to be laid to rest with dignity, Miss Reeves, even out here. He glanced toward the door. But we need to move fast. We've got maybe 3 hours of daylight left, and it's an 8-mile trek back to my place. In this cold at night, that's a death sentence. They worked together in grim silence, wrapping Olivia's parents in what blankets and furs could be spared. Logan did the heavy lifting, carrying each body out to the snowbank while Olivia gathered what few personal items she could carry. Her mother's locket, her father's pocket watch, a small Bible that had belonged to her grandmother, a few changes of clothes. Everything else would have to stay. Logan's powerful arms made quick work of piling snow over the bodies, packing it down tight. Olivia stood nearby, her lips moving in silent prayer, tears freezing on her cheeks. When he finished, she placed 2 crossed branches at the head of the mound, her hands shaking from more than just cold. We should go, Logan said gently. Weather's turning. He was right. Olivia could feel it in the air, that peculiar heaviness that presaged more snow. She took one last look at the cabin that had been her home, at the makeshift grave of her parents, and felt something inside her shift. The girl who'd lived here was gone. Whatever happened next, whoever she became, it wouldn't be the same person. Logan had already shouldered both their packs, his rifle slung across his back with practiced ease. He moved through the deep snow like it was nothing, his long legs eating up distance while Olivia struggled to keep pace. She'd thought herself hardened to winter after 3 years in Wyoming, but watching Logan move through the landscape made her realize how much she'd had yet to learn. He navigated by landmarks invisible to her eyes, adjusted their path to avoid slopes that might avalanche, tested the ice over frozen streams before crossing. "Keep close," he called back over his shoulder as the wind picked up. "Storm's coming faster than I thought." The snow began in earnest 20 minutes later, fat flakes that quickly became a white curtain reducing visibility to mere feet. Olivia lost sight of Logan twice, panic clawing at her throat until his massive form materialized out of the storm, his gloved hand reaching back to grab hers. "Don't let go," he shouted over the howling wind. "Stay right behind me." Olivia had no breath to reply. She simply held onto his hand like a lifeline and pushed forward, one foot in front of the other, trusting this stranger because she had no other choice. Her legs burned with exhaustion, her lungs ached from the cold air, and her face had gone numb an hour ago. Just when she thought she couldn't take another step, Logan pulled her forward into sudden darkness. They were inside. A cave, Olivia thought at first, but as her eyes adjusted she saw it was a cabin, larger than her parents' place, built into the mountainside itself with walls of thick logs and a roof that extended from the living rock. Logan kicked the door shut behind them, cutting off the screaming wind. "Stay there," he commanded, already moving through the darkness with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of his domain. Within moments, he had a fire roaring in a large stone fireplace, revealing a space easily twice the size of her parents' cabin. Furs covered the floor and walls. Shelves held supplies, tools, weapons. A sturdy ladder led to a loft space beneath the high ceiling. It was sparse but well built, the home of someone who valued function over form. "Get out of those wet things," Logan said, pulling furs from a chest. "You're half frozen already." Olivia's fingers were too numb to work the buttons of her coat. She fumbled uselessly, frustration and exhaustion bringing tears to her eyes. Without a word, Logan stepped forward, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her out of the frozen garments. He kept his eyes averted, his movements purely practical, then wrapped her in thick furs and guided her to sit by the fire. "Don't get too close too fast," he warned. "Warm up gradual or you'll hurt worse." He moved away, and Olivia heard him working in another part of the cabin. The warmth seeping into her bones made her realize just how close she'd come to dying. Another hour in that storm and she wouldn't have made it. She looked at the man who'd saved her, really looked at him for the first time. Logan had removed his own coat, revealing a frame of solid muscle earned through hard labor and harder living. His arms, exposed by rolled-up sleeves as he worked, showed the kind of strength that came from chopping wood, hauling water, and doing everything needed to survive alone in the wilderness. His face, half hidden by his beard, showed lines of weather and hardship, but his eyes when they met hers were a startling blue, clear and direct. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming back for me, for all of this." Logan glanced at her, then back to the pot he was preparing. "Didn't have much choice, couldn't leave you there to die. Most men would have. Then most men are fools." He hung the pot over the fire. "This'll take a bit to heat. It's just dried venison and vegetables, but it's hot and it'll fill your belly." Olivia's stomach growled at the mention of food. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Before the men came, that felt like a lifetime ago. "I can help, I'm a decent cook. Tonight you rest." Logan settled onto a bench across from her, his long legs stretched toward the fire. "We need to talk about how this'll work. Ground rules, if you will. All right. First off, we pull our own weight here. I won't have you thinking you're a guest or that I'm doing you charity. You're here because we both benefit. I don't have to worry about you dying and you get food and shelter. Fair trade." Olivia nodded slowly. "What would you have me do? Cooking, like you said. Mending. I'm hell with a needle. Help with preparing furs, smoking meat when we have it. There's plenty to do and winter days are long." He paused, his eyes serious. "Second rule, and this is important. What I said before holds. You'll sleep in the loft, I sleep down here. I won't bother you that way, and I expect the same respect back. We're two people surviving winter together, nothing more." Something in Olivia's chest tightened at that, though she couldn't say why. "Agreed. Third, when the weather's clear enough, I'll need to hunt, sometimes for days at a time. You'll be here alone. Can you handle that?" "I managed 3 days alone after my parents died." "That's not what I'm asking. Can you maintain this place? Keep the fire going, keep yourself fed, keep watch." His gaze was penetrating. "Because if you can't, I need to know now. I won't come back from a hunt to find you frozen because you let the fire die." Pride stiffened Olivia's spine. "I can manage. I'm not helpless, Mr. Quinn. Logan, if we're living together, might as well use given names." He stood, moving to check the pot. "And I never said you were helpless, Miss Reeves, but there's a difference between surviving and actually living through winter in these mountains." "Then teach me." The words came out before Olivia could think better of them. "You know these mountains. You've survived here 7 years. Teach me what I need to know." Logan looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded. "All right, I'll teach you. But you have to promise me something." "What?" "You'll listen. When I tell you something's dangerous or that you're doing something wrong, you don't argue. Your pride's not worth your life." "My pride kept me alive while you were still miles away, Mr. Quinn." "Logan," he corrected again. "And that's exactly the attitude that'll get you killed. There's a difference between courage and foolishness, and knowing that difference is how you survive." Olivia wanted to argue, but the exhaustion weighing down her limbs made the effort seem pointless. Instead, she watched as Logan ladled stew into wooden bowls, the steam rising in fragrant curls. When he handed her a bowl, their fingers brushed, and Olivia felt calluses earned through years of hard work. These were hands that had built this cabin, that had survived alone in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The stew was simple but delicious, and Olivia ate 2 bowls before she could stop herself. Logan said nothing, just filled her bowl again when she hesitated, as if he understood the particular hunger that came from fear and cold and grief all mixed together. "You should sleep," he said when she'd finished. "Loft's got good furs and blankets. Should be warm enough." Olivia climbed the ladder on shaking legs, finding the loft space larger than she'd expected. Furs were piled thick on a frame bed, and the heat from the fire below rose to make the space surprisingly cozy. She collapsed onto the bed, not even bothering to remove her boots, and was asleep before she could form another thought. Down below, Logan sat by the fire long into the night, staring at the flames and wondering what he'd gotten himself into. He'd come to these mountains to escape people, to live a solitary life away from the complications that came with society and relationships. And now, he had a woman sleeping in his loft, a woman with green eyes that held both strength and vulnerability, a woman who just lost everything. He poked at the fire, watching sparks spiral upward. The winter supplies had been plenty for one. For two, they'd need careful rationing. which meant he'd need to hunt and hunt hard. The elk were scarce this year, driven to lower elevations by the heavy snows. But there were deer in the valleys, rabbits in the thickets, even mountain sheep if he was willing to climb high enough. Logan stood, stretching muscles sore from the long trek through the storm. He'd make it work. He always did. And come spring, Olivia Reeves would go her own way, and his life would return to the solitary peace he'd built for himself. He just had to make sure they both survived until then. The days that followed settled into a rhythm neither of them had expected. Logan woke before dawn each morning, building up the fire and preparing a simple breakfast while Olivia slept. By the time she climbed down from the loft, usually as the first gray light filtered through the cabin's small windows, food would be ready and Logan would be checking his traps and equipment. "Coffee," he'd grunt, and she'd nod, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as she joined him by the fire. They'd eat in companionable silence, neither of them being much for morning conversation. Then Logan would outline the day's tasks. True to his word, he taught her how to bank a fire so it would last for hours without attention, how to read the weather by the quality of light on the snow, the behavior of the birds, how to stretch supplies by making broths from bones, by using every part of the animals he brought back from hunting, how to prepare furs properly so they'd stay supple and warm. Olivia proved an apt student. Within a week, she could maintain the cabin on her own. Within 2, she'd reorganized Logan's chaotic supply system, grouping like items together and creating an inventory of what they had. Logan came back from checking his trap lines one afternoon to find her methodically going through the root cellar, sorting and cataloging. "What are you doing?" he asked, bemused. "Making sure we know exactly what we have," she replied without looking up. "We've got about 40 pounds of dried beans, 30 pounds of flour, maybe 15 pounds of cornmeal, salt, sugar, dried vegetables, and whatever meat you can hunt. If we're careful, that's enough. I know what I've got. Do you?" She finally looked up, her expression challenging. "Because I found 3 separate stores of flour in 3 different places, and a sack of cornmeal that had gotten damp and was starting to mold. If we're going to survive on these supplies, we can't afford waste." Logan felt irritation flare, then just as quickly fade. She was right. He'd always been a bit haphazard with organization, more focused on acquiring supplies than properly storing them. "Fine, you manage the stores, but I want a full accounting of what we use each day." Already doing it. She showed him a piece of paper where she'd been tracking consumption in neat handwriting. "At our current rate, we'll need to supplement with at least 2 deer or 1 elk per month to make it through March. That's ambitious. Game's scarce. Then we'll need to be careful with portions." Her eyes met his steadily. "I've been hungry before, Mr. Quinn. I mean Logan. I can do it again if needed." "Won't come to that," he said gruffly, disturbed by the thought of her going hungry. "I'm a good hunter. We'll manage." But Olivia's words stuck with him as he went out on his next hunt. He needed to be more than good. He needed to be exceptional. 2 people required more than twice the resources of 1. He was learning. 2 people created complications, dependencies, needs that solitary living never had to account for. The hunt was brutally difficult. Snow had buried the usual deer trails, and the animals had moved to new territory. Logan spent 3 days tracking a small herd, sleeping in snow caves and pushing his body to its limits. When he finally brought down a young buck, relief flooded through him that had nothing to do with his own hunger and everything to do with the woman waiting back at the cabin. He returned to find Olivia had kept everything running smoothly in his absence. The cabin was warm, the woodpile restocked from his stores, the water bucket full. She'd even baked bread, somehow coaxing his temperamental Dutch oven into producing decent loaves. "You were gone longer than you said," she said as he dragged the deer carcass inside. Her voice was calm, but he caught the undercurrent of worry. Tracking took longer than expected. Games moved to the eastern valleys. He began the work of butchering, his knife moving with practiced efficiency. "Did you manage all right?" "Of course." She moved to help, taking the pieces he cut and beginning the process of preparing them for storage. "Though I worried you might have gotten caught in that storm 2 nights ago. Found shelter. I've been doing this a long time, Olivia." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and they both paused, the intimacy of it hanging in the air between them. Then Olivia returned to her work and the moment passed, but something had shifted. Over the following weeks, as January gave way to February and the cold deepened to bone-breaking intensity, they grew more comfortable with each other. Evenings by the fire became times of quiet conversation. Logan spoke of his past in sparse sentences, how he'd come west after the war, unable to settle back into civilian life, how the mountains had called to him with their promise of solitude and simplicity. Olivia shared memories of Ohio, of her mother's flower garden and her father's laugh, of the dreams they'd had when they came west. "Pa thought we'd build something lasting," she said one night, her voice soft with memory. "A legacy," he called it, "something to pass down to grandchildren." "Maybe you still can," Logan offered. "Once spring comes, once you figure out what you want to do. Maybe." But she sounded doubtful, and Logan found himself wanting to say something more, to offer some kind of comfort, but the words wouldn't come. He'd lived alone too long, forgotten how to speak the language of emotional support. Instead, he did what he knew how to do. He hunted. As the winter supplies continued to dwindle despite their careful rationing, Logan went out more frequently, pushing himself harder. He'd leave before dawn and return after dark, his powerful frame showing the strain of constant exertion. He brought back rabbits, a few grouse, once a small deer that kept them fed for nearly 2 weeks. But it wasn't enough. By mid-February, their supplies were running dangerously low. The flour was nearly gone, the beans depleted. They had meat but little else. Logan could see Olivia growing thinner, though she never complained, never asked for more than her carefully measured portion. "I need to go higher," he announced one morning. "Up to the North Ridge. Mountain sheep sometimes winter there." "That's a 3-day trek at least," Olivia protested. "And the weather's been unpredictable. We need the meat. And the supplies. I'll move fast, should be back in 4 days, 5 at most, Logan." She stood, moving closer to him. Over the past weeks, they'd gradually encroached on each other's space, the invisible boundaries between them eroding. Now she stood close enough that he could smell the wood smoke in her hair. "It's too dangerous. The cold is worse than it's been all winter. What if you get caught in a storm? Then you'll need to manage alone until I get back." He met her eyes, seeing the fear there and hating that he was the cause of it. "I know what I'm doing, Olivia. Trust me." "I do trust you. That's why I'm asking you not to go." For a moment, Logan wavered. It would be easy to stay, to tell himself they'd make do with what they had. But he knew better. Winter still had weeks left in her and their supplies wouldn't last. If he didn't hunt now, they'd both starve before spring. "I have to," he said quietly. "You know I do." Olivia's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Then let me help you prepare. And Logan, come back, please." The journey to the North Ridge tested every bit of Logan's skill and endurance. The cold was savage, turning his breath to ice crystals that hung in the air. The wind cut through his heaviest furs, seeking the warmth beneath. But he pushed on, driven by the memory of Olivia's face, by the knowledge that she was depending on him. He found the sheep on the second day, a small herd taking shelter in a rocky outcropping. The shot was difficult, uphill in high wind, but his aim was true. The ram dropped, and Logan spent the next hours field dressing it and preparing to haul the meat back. It was more weight than one man should carry, but he had no choice. He loaded himself down and began the trek back. The storm caught him on the third day, a blizzard that came out of nowhere and reduced the world to white chaos. Logan pushed through it, navigating by instinct and stubborn will, refusing to stop because stopping meant freezing and freezing meant death, and death meant leaving Olivia alone. He didn't remember the last few hours. They existed in his memory as a blur of cold and pain and putting one foot in front of the other because stopping wasn't an option. When he finally saw the cabin, it was through eyes nearly swollen shut from the cold, his body beyond exhaustion. The door opened before he could reach it, and Olivia was there, her face shocked and pale. "Dear God, Logan." She helped him inside, helped him drop the heavy packs of meat, helped him to the fire. His hands were white with frostbite, his face frost-burned. Olivia worked with quick efficiency, removing his frozen outer layers, wrapping him in furs, bringing warm broth to his lips. "You fool," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You beautiful, stupid fool, you nearly died." "Had to," Logan managed through numb lips. "Had to keep you fed." "I'd rather starve than lose you." The words burst out of her, raw and honest, and they both froze as the truth hung between them. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Somewhere in the long winter nights, in the shared silences and small moments of care, they'd become something more than two people weathering a storm together. Logan reached up with a shaking hand, cupping Olivia's face. "I couldn't let you go hungry, couldn't stand the thought of it." "Why?" She leaned into his touch, her hand coming up to cover his. "Why does it matter so much to you? You know why." His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Think you've known for weeks now, same as me." Olivia closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they held a certainty that matched his own. "I fell in love with you somewhere between you teaching me to bank a fire and watching you haul water up from the creek in the middle of a snowstorm. For me, it was watching you reorganize my chaos and make this place feel like a home instead of just shelter." Logan pulled her closer, and she came willingly, settling onto the floor beside him, her head on his shoulder. "Didn't plan on this. Came to these mountains to be alone." "I'm sorry," she murmured, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Don't be." He pressed his lips to her hair, breathing in the scent of her. "Best thing that ever happened to me, you showing up in my life." They sat like that for a long time, the fire crackling, the wind howling outside, but the cold unable to touch them. When Logan's hands had warmed enough to feel again, he tilted Olivia's face up and kissed her, tentative at first, then deeper when she responded with equal passion. It was a kiss that held all the words neither of them were good at saying, all the fear and relief and love that had been building for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, Logan rested his forehead against hers. "This changes things." "Yes," Olivia agreed, "though I'm not sure how much." "We're still trapped in a cabin for the rest of winter, still rationing supplies and hoping to survive until spring." "True, but now I'm not keeping you fed out of responsibility. I'm doing it because I love you, and I'll be damned if anything happens to you. And I'm not caring for you because of fair trade or ground rules. I'm doing it because the thought of losing you terrifies me more than any blizzard." She kissed him again, softer this time. "So we survived together. Deal, deal." The rest of February passed in a strange sort of happiness. They were hungry more often than not. The supplies stretched to their absolute limits, but they had each other. Logan recovered from his frostbite, though he lost the tips of 2 fingers on his left hand. Olivia nursed him through it, wrapping the wounds and making sure they stayed clean, sitting up nights when fever threatened. "You're too stubborn to die on me now," she told him during one long night when the pain kept him wakeful. "I won't allow it." "Yes, madam," he said with a weak smile. "Wouldn't dream of disobeying." She held his hand, the good one, and told him stories from her childhood to distract him from the pain. About catching fireflies in Ohio summers, about learning to bake bread with her grandmother, about a boy she'd thought she'd loved at 16 before she'd learned what love really meant. "What does it mean?" Logan asked. "Real love, I mean." Olivia considered this. "I think it's this. Sitting up in the dark with someone, not because you have to, but because you can't imagine being anywhere else. It's making yourself vulnerable and trusting them not to hurt you. It's putting their well-being above your own comfort." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "It's you nearly dying to bring back meat because you couldn't stand the thought of me being hungry. It's you caring for me now when you could be sleeping," Logan added. "It's the way you smile when you think I'm not looking. It's how I've started measuring time not by days, but by moments with you." They made love for the first time on the last night of February, the cabin warm and close around them. It was tender and passionate, and everything that felt right. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances becoming fully committed to one another. Afterward, they lay tangled in furs by the fire, Olivia's head on Logan's broad chest, his arms around her. "Stay with me," Logan said quietly, "not just till spring. Forever, make this your home." "I have nowhere else I'd rather be," Olivia replied. "But Logan, we need to be practical. We can't live the rest of our lives trapped in a cabin." "Won't be trapped. When spring comes, we can go to Marysvale, get proper married. Maybe add onto the cabin, make it bigger. I've been thinking about putting in a real window, maybe building a separate room. And I could trap more seriously, sell the furs, make a real living instead of just surviving." Olivia raised herself on one elbow, looking down at him. "You've been thinking about this ever since that first night when I realized I didn't want you to leave come spring, maybe even before that if I'm honest." His hand traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I know it's not much of a life I'm offering. Hard work and isolation and winters like this one. But it's honest and it's ours if you want it." "I want it," she said without hesitation. "I want you and this life and whatever comes next, together." March arrived with no lessening of the cold, but their spirits were high despite empty bellies and dwindling supplies. Logan hunted every day that weather permitted, bringing back small game that they savored. Olivia made every scrap count, boiling bones for broth, using fat for candles and cooking, wasting nothing. They talked about the future during long evenings. Logan wanted to teach Olivia to shoot properly, to trap, to ride. She wanted to plant a garden come spring, to maybe get some chickens, to make the cabin into a real home. They made plans like any young couple in love, their dreams simple but heartfelt. "I'd like children someday," Olivia said one night. "Not right away, but eventually. Is that something you want?" Logan was quiet for a moment, considering. "Never thought I did. Figured I wasn't fit to be a father, too rough around the edges, but with you? Yeah, I can see it. A boy maybe, someone to teach the mountains to, or a girl with your green eyes and stubborn streak." "Stubborn," Olivia laughed. "That's rich coming from a man who walked through a blizzard with frostbite rather than stopped to wait it out." "Fair point." He pulled her closer. "But yeah, children, a family, that sounds right." By mid-March, the worst of winter finally began to break. The days grew incrementally longer, the sun slightly warmer. Snow still blanketed everything, but there were signs that spring was coming. Birds returned. The ice on the creek began to thin. And most importantly, game became more plentiful as animals emerged from their winter hiding places. Logan brought back a elk in late March, and they both nearly wept with relief. Proper food, enough to see them through until spring truly arrived and the world opened up again. They ate until their stomachs hurt, savoring every bite, then carefully prepared the rest for storage. "We made it," Olivia said that night, wrapped in Logan's arms. "We actually survived. Never doubted it, not with you here." Logan kissed her temple. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known, Olivia Reeves. These mountains didn't break you, nothing will. They didn't break me because I had you. You kept me fed, you kept me warm, you gave me a reason to fight through every hard day." She turned to face him fully. "I came to these mountains expecting to die, Logan. Instead, I found life. I found love. I found home. Then let's make it official. Soon as the pass is clear enough, we'll go to Marysvale, find a preacher, become husband and wife proper. I'm already yours," Olivia said simply. "Have been since you walked into that cabin covered in snow and started bossing me around about staying warm." Logan laughed, the sound rumbling from his chest. "You make it sound romantic when you say it like that." It was romantic. A big, gruff mountain man risking everything to save a woman he didn't even know, then spending an entire winter hunting tirelessly to keep her fed and warm. If that's not romance, I don't know what is. Put that way, I sound almost heroic. You are heroic, my hero anyway. She kissed him long and deep. "And I'm never letting you go." True to his word, as soon as the mountain passes became navigable in early April, Logan and Olivia made the journey to Marysvale, Wyoming. The small town was surprised to see Logan Quinn, the solitary mountain man who rarely came down except for essential supplies, arriving with a woman at his side. Even more surprising was his announcement that they needed a preacher. The local minister, Reverend Thomas, was happy to oblige. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church with only a handful of witnesses. Olivia wore a simple dress purchased that morning from the general store. Logan had trimmed his beard and cleaned up as best he could, though he still looked like what he was, a man of the wilderness. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Logan kissed Olivia with all the pent-up emotion of the past months, and the small congregation cheered. They spent one night in town, at the boarding house, in a real bed in a real room, before heading back to the mountains. "Strange being around so many people," Logan commented as they rode back up the mountain. He'd purchased 2 horses, supplies, and seeds for Olivia's garden with the furs he'd brought to trade. "It was," Olivia agreed, "but I'm ready to go home." Home. The word settled around them like a benediction. The cabin was indeed home now for both of them. Over the spring and summer, they worked to improve it. Logan added the window he'd promised, built a separate bedroom, and expanded the cabin to nearly twice its original size. Olivia planted her garden, coaxing vegetables from the rocky soil with determination and care. They fell into the rhythms of mountain life. Logan trapped and hunted, Olivia cooked and preserved. Together they built something neither had thought they'd find, a true partnership built on mutual respect and deep love. When fall came again, they were prepared, their stores full, their cabin tight and warm. Olivia discovered she was pregnant in October. She told Logan one evening as they sat by the fire, simply taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by wonder and a fierce protectiveness. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We're having a baby." "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy, Olivia, I'm." He couldn't find words, so he showed her instead, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes. Winter came again, but it held no fear for them now. Their supplies were plentiful, carefully planned and stored. Logan hunted, but without the desperation of the year before. They were prepared for whatever the mountains could throw at them. Olivia grew round with pregnancy as the snow deepened. Logan became even more protective, constantly worrying about her, making sure she was warm enough, fed enough, rested enough. She tolerated his hovering with good humor, knowing it came from love. "I'm not made of glass," she told him one morning when he insisted on helping her with a simple chore. "I know, but you're carrying my child, and I'll be damned if anything happens to either of you." "Nothing's going to happen. Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. I'll be fine." But as Olivia's time drew near in late February, Logan grew increasingly anxious. They were still snowbound, miles from town and any doctor or midwife. If something went wrong, he'd be the only help she had. "I've been reading the medical book," Olivia assured him, showing him the worn volume they'd purchased in town. "And I've been talking to women in Marysvale before winter set in. I know what to expect. I should take you to town. We should wait there until the baby comes. And leave our home unprotected. Leave all we've built." Olivia shook her head. "No, we've survived worse than childbirth, Logan. We'll manage this too." When labor began on a cold March morning, Logan discovered a new kind of fear. All his strength and skill meant nothing in the face of this. He could hunt, he could build, he could survive anything the wilderness threw at him, but he couldn't do this for her. He could only hold her hand, wipe her brow, and pray. It was a long labor, lasting through the day and into the night. Logan stayed by her side the entire time, his face drawn with worry as Olivia labored to bring their child into the world. When dawn broke on a new day, and the baby finally came, a healthy boy with strong lungs and his mother's determination, Logan wept openly. "A son," Olivia whispered, exhausted but triumphant, as Logan carefully placed the wrapped infant in her arms. "We have a son." Logan looked at them both, his wife and child, and felt something crack open in his chest. This was what he'd been missing all those years alone in the mountains. This was what made survival worthwhile, not just enduring but having something precious to protect and nurture. "What should we call him?" he asked, his finger gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "I was thinking Lucas Quinn." Olivia smiled up at him. "After his strong, brave father." "Lucas," Logan repeated, testing the name. "I like it." The baby thrived despite being born in the wilderness. Olivia recovered quickly, her strength returning as spring began to transform the mountains. Logan was a devoted father, surprisingly gentle with the tiny infant despite his rough hands and powerful build. He'd sit for hours with Lucas sleeping on his broad chest, marveling at the small miracle they'd created. As spring turned to summer, they settled into their new life as a family. Olivia's garden flourished. Logan's trapping brought in good money. Little Lucas grew fat and happy on his mother's milk. They made occasional trips to Marysvale for supplies and to let the town doctor check on the baby, but mostly they kept to themselves, content in their mountain home. "Do you ever regret it?" Logan asked one evening as they sat outside, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Lucas slept in a cradleboard nearby, and Olivia was mending one of Logan's shirts. "Regret what? This life. The isolation, the hardship. You could have gone to town after your parents died, made a life there, found a banker or shopkeeper to marry, had an easier life." Olivia set down her mending and took his hand. "An easier life isn't necessarily a better one. You gave me everything that matters, Logan. Love, a home, a family, a purpose. Why would I regret that? Some women would. I'm not some women, I'm your wife, and this is where I belong." She squeezed his hand. Every hard day of that first winter, every hungry night, every moment of fear and cold, it was worth it to end up here, with you. With our son. With this life we've built. Logan pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the light faded and stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the cabin, a fire crackled. Meat hung smoking over the fireplace. Shelves were full of preserved vegetables from the garden. Everything they needed to survive another winter and the winters after that. For as long as they both lived, over the years that followed, their family grew. A daughter arrived 2 years after Lucas, a green-eyed girl they named Olivia after her mother but called Lily to avoid confusion. Then another son, and another daughter. The cabin expanded to accommodate them all, becoming a true homestead rather than just a simple shelter. Logan taught his sons to hunt and trap, to read the mountains and respect their power. Olivia taught her daughters to garden and preserve, to keep a home in the wilderness. But all the children learned from both parents the most important lessons: the value of hard work, the strength that comes from facing hardship together, and the depth of love that could bloom even in the harshest conditions. Marysvale grew over the years, the railroad eventually reaching the small town and bringing more settlers. But the Quinn family remained in their mountains, becoming something of a legend. Stories were told of the hard winter when Logan Quinn hunted tirelessly to keep his woman fed and warm, of how love could flourish even in the depths of winter's cruelty. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Logan and Olivia sat on the porch of their expanded cabin, gray now threading through their hair, lines of age and weather marking their faces. Their children were grown, some moved to Marysvale, some starting homesteads of their own in the surrounding mountains. But Logan and Olivia remained, bound to this place that had witnessed their beginning. "You remember that first winter?" Olivia asked, her hand in his as they watched the sunset, still as beautiful as the day they'd first watched it together a quarter-century before. "Remember it? I think about it all the time." Logan squeezed her hand. "Hardest winter of my life, but the best too. It gave me you. We were so young. So unprepared for what we were taking on. We were. But we figured it out." He looked at her, his eyes still as blue and clear as they'd been that day he'd found her in the cabin. "I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Every hard day, every hungry night, every moment of worry. All of it just to end up right here." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength still there despite the years. "I love you, Logan Quinn. Have from almost the beginning, will until the end. And I love you, Olivia Quinn. You took a lonely mountain man and made him the richest man in the world." He pressed a kiss to her silver-streaked hair. "Thank you for that first winter. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger who didn't know the first thing about talking to a woman but knew how to hunt to keep her fed. Thank you for seeing something worth saving when you found me, for not riding past that cabin." They sat in the gathering dusk, hands clasped, hearts intertwined, two people who'd found each other in the midst of winter's fury and built a love strong enough to last a lifetime. The mountains rose around them, eternal and unchanging, witness to their story. And if the wind carried their whispers through the pines, it sounded like laughter and love, and the quiet contentment of two souls who'd found their home. The stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had watched over them that first desperate winter. And below, in the cabin that had sheltered them through 25 winters, and would shelter them through however many more they were blessed to see, a fire burned warm and bright, a symbol of the warmth they'd created together from the cold ashes of loss and loneliness. Logan and Olivia Quinn remained in their mountains until they were old and gray, their love story becoming the stuff of legend in Marysvale and beyond. When they finally passed, within days of each other as old couples sometimes do, their children buried them on the mountain they'd loved, overlooking the valley where Logan had hunted tirelessly to keep Olivia fed and warm during that first brutal winter. And sometimes, folks said, on cold winter nights when the wind howled through the pines, you could still feel their presence in those mountains, still sense the love that had burned bright enough to defy winter's worst cruelty. It became a story parents told their children, a reminder that true love could flourish anywhere, that hardship shared could forge bonds stronger than steel, and that sometimes the greatest treasures were found in the most unexpected places. The cabin stood for generations after, carefully maintained by the Quinn descendants, a monument to the winter when supplies ran low, and a mountain man hunted tirelessly to keep the woman he loved fed and warm, and in doing so found not just survival, but a reason to live, a purpose beyond mere existence, and a love that would echo through the mountains for all time. Their story ended not with drama or tragedy, but with quiet fulfillment, two lives well lived in devotion to each other and the family they'd built. It was a simple story in many ways, but simplicity often holds the deepest truths. That love requires sacrifice. That strength comes from vulnerability. That sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest times. And that home isn't a place, but rather the person whose hand you hold as you face whatever storms may come. In the end, that was the true legacy of Logan and Olivia Quinn, not the homestead they'd built or the children they'd raised, important as those were, but the example they'd set of what love could be when stripped to its essentials. Two people choosing each other, day after day, through hunger and cold and hardship, building something beautiful from the raw materials of determination and devotion. Their love story, born in winter's depths, had bloomed into something that would warm hearts for generations to come. And perhaps that was the greatest triumph of all, not just surviving the winter, but transforming it into a testament to the enduring power of love, the kind of love that hunts tirelessly not out of obligation, but out of the fierce need to protect and cherish, the kind of love that turns a simple cabin into a home and two strangers into soulmates bound together for all their days.